Okay, here we are in lesson 3, and we see 3 things on the screen. On the left, our HTML file. In the middle, the JavaScript file. And both of these are in the IDE. And on the right, our web page opened up. Like with all of our HTML code, we begin with this line that tells the browser we are using HTML5. After that, like with all of our web pages, we begin with the HTML tag. Next, we have the head tag. After that, the title tag, which is inside of the head tag. Then we close the head tag. We have data in the title tag that displays in the tab of the browser. After that, the body tag, where everything we want to display in the web page goes. The first data we have in the body tag is this line of letters that displays in the web page. And after that, we add a new tag, the script tag. And we can see that the script tag opens and closes with nothing inside of it. But even though there isn't anything inside the tag, we've added information to the opening tag. But here we have a problem because we are using the words inside of for 2 things. I'm using the words inside of to represent the space inside the opening and closing tags, and also using inside of to represent the data in the opening tag. To resolve this problem, we're going to use a new term. This is called an attribute. There are different kinds of attributes, like the attribute style that we used in the previous lesson, and this attribute that means source, fuente, in Spanish. A source attribute points to a file, a photo, or other similar things. And this source attribute loads the JavaScript file. From now on, when I want to refer to data in the opening tag, I'm going to use the word attribute. And when I want to refer to the information inside of the opening and closing tag, I'm going to say inside the tag. The reason this script tag doesn't have anything inside is because this source calls the JavaScript file and loads its contents inside of the script tag. This is to say that when we call a JavaScript file from the script tag, it's exactly the same as having our JavaScript code inside of the script tag. The reason for creating separate JavaScript files is human convenience. If we remove our code from the JavaScript file and put it here directly in the script tag, it doesn't matter to the HTML engine or the JavaScript engine. Whether or not we put the code here, when we make a call with our source attribute, our code is loaded here. There are many things like this in computing. Things happen in the background, and as programmers, we need to understand it. We put our code here in a separate file because it's better for the programmer. But when we call it from here, we understand that it executes here. Now we are going to pause for a moment to talk about something. With structures like this or any other, don't try to remember how to write it. Because look, there are thousands of structures to write, and you are not going to remember them. When the day comes that you need to write them, you are going to have to refer to examples online or in code that you have saved in other files. But don't worry about that, because as these videos advance, you are going to receive all of the code to have in files of your own. What's important is that you concentrate on the concepts. They are going to overwhelm you, and you need to use every cell in your brain to understand them. Pause the videos as much as necessary. Review them many times, and be careful not to advance to the next video until you understand the concepts clearly. And with that, we continue. We can see in the body tag the word source, and this word displays in the web page. But if we move it inside of the script tag and refresh the browser, we don't see it in the page anymore. This is because the word source doesn't make sense to the JavaScript engine. The script tag is special when the HTML engine is reading the code from top to bottom and left to right. When it gets to the script tag, the HTML engine stops and the JavaScript engine starts up. The JavaScript engine doesn't know what to do with this word here. But when we move it here, the HTML engine does know what to do with this word. It simply puts it in the page. JavaScript has a different purpose than HTML, and it interprets things differently. The purpose of HTML is to simply describe the page. When the HTML engine reads these letters, it puts them on the page. And we can use HTML tags to add more descriptions of these letters. Here I've put an H1 tag, an H1 box with our word inside. There are many different tags in the HTML language, and as we can see, the H1 tag makes our letters bigger and thicker. Without the H1 description, the engine simply writes the word to the page. With the H1 descriptor, the H1 tag describing the letters are like this. And as you know, we can add more information to describe the data. We can add an attribute, a style attribute. One style of attribute is color. There are many kinds of styles. In this case, we use the style color and put the value red. When we refresh the page, the letters change to red. Therefore, we have two specific descriptions for our data. We have the H1 tag that causes our letters to be bigger and thicker, and we have an attribute that makes the letters red. And once again, we have a word without specific descriptions. If you understand this, you understand a lot about HTML. But this same line of letters doesn't do anything when read by the JavaScript engine. When code is inside of the script tags, it must follow the rules of JavaScript. Now, on the left side of the screen, we have our IDE, and on the right side, the web page opened. In the IDE, we have two files opened, and the one displaying now is index.html. And we can see that the tab of the web page displays the letters in the title tag. Also, the HTML code calls the file jscode.js. When the index.html file loads, our JavaScript file loads as well. At this moment, the JavaScript code is not designed to show anything in the web page. And for now, we are only going to use our web page to work with our JavaScript code. All browsers have constructed within them a type of IDE. When I press F12, this is what we see. And with this, we need to talk a little about the loading of files into memory. When we open them in our IDE, the contents of the files are copied. And these copies are used for our IDE. We can make changes to the code, and when we save it, the changes are copied to the original files. But the code here is different. The purpose of the IDE is to load our code and help us write new lines or change the ones we already have. The purpose of the browser is to load the code into RAM in the way we discussed in Lesson 1, and then execute the code in order to get the intended results in our web page. The browser loads the HTML file, and the HTML file loads the JavaScript file. The tools in the browser can show us our code, and as you will see, this is a central service for testing our code. But remember, this is only a view to our lines. The way they are really loaded into RAM is the way in which we discussed in Lesson 1. We are going to do a lot of work here in the console. This is where we can talk directly to our code loaded in RAM. We can write in the console in order to talk to our code. Here we are asking the browser to return the value of myvar2. When I press the Enter key, we see our value. If I write myvar1 and press Enter, it says undefined. This means that the variable doesn't have a definition, or it doesn't have a value stored with it in the stack. If I write myvar3, and this is very important, when I press Enter, we receive an error. This is because there is no myvar3. The JavaScript engine searched in the stack for a myvar3, but didn't find it. When we put myvar1, the engine did find a variable in the stack, but there was no value stored with it. And of course, when we put myvar2, the engine did find a myvar2 variable in the stack and also found a value stored with it. When we put myobj, it shows us the object, and we can open it here to see all of the properties inside of it. And it's the same with myfunc. If we put myfunc here and press Enter, it shows us the function. And in the console, we can even create variables. for temporary testing. Remember that when we put myvar3, we received an error because there is no myvar3 in the stack. But we can put it there. Here we aren't simply putting myvar3, which would ask for the value of the variable, but I'm adding var, and this tells the JavaScript engine to put a myvar3 into the stack. Now when we put myvar3 and press enter, we do not receive an error like we did before, because now there is a myvar3 in the stack, and we can write a line to put a value with it. Now when we write myvar3 to ask for its value, we receive the value. And for the last part of this lesson, I'm going to describe more clearly what you are seeing in the console. Here we simply write myvar3. When this is done, you are asking for the value of the variable. And at this point, we didn't have a myvar3 in the stack. And we received an error. Here, with the word var, we are declaring a variable, which means we are putting it into the stack. When we press enter, we immediately get undefined. This is because this line is doing two things at the same time. The first thing is that it's putting the variable into the stack. The second thing is that it's returning the value as though we were asking for it. This line is saying that we have a variable in the stack, but we haven't put a value with it. This condition is called undefined, or there is no definition. Once again, we ask for the value here and receive undefined because there is no value stored with the variable in the stack. Now we have a variable in the stack and we can add a value to it. And the same as when we declared myvar3, this line does two things at the same time. The first thing was to give myvar3 a value, and the second thing was to return the value, as if we had asked for it. Here we are simply asking for the value, and it is returned. And we can change the value of our variable. Here we ask for the value, and it is returned. Here we assign a new value to the same variable, and like before, two things happen at the same time. The first is that the value is assigned to the variable. The second thing is that the value is returned. Here we simply ask for the value of myvar3 and it's returned. Here we create a new variable to put in the stack and in the same line assign a value to it. And when we do this, it returns undefined. This doesn't really make sense, but it's the way that this tool functions. Whenever you declare a variable and assign a value to it in the same line, it returns undefined. You will get used to seeing it, but really here myvar4 has a value of 2. We ask for the value of myvar4 and it is returned. And for the last thing, we can do calculations here directly in the console. We are adding the values of myvar3 and myvar4. And when we press enter, the result of the calculation is returned. Review this part of the video that deals with the console until you are very clear with how the lines are entered and returned. We are going to spend a lot of time working in the console, and you don't want to be confused while trying to learn. Okay, this is the end of Lesson 3.